Chapter 13 of Tractor Ballet Gone Bad. We hadn't gotten very far along when Ernie bumped into me as I stopped, looking about in bewilderment. "What are you stopping for, Scotty?" Ernie asked. "I must have got off track somehow," I replied, looking about in confusion. "Shit," Todd said, arriving at my side. "We're not off track. This is where Ernie had his little hissy fit on the way down." "But we got around that," I said, still confused, as I gestured at the impassable barrier of windswept ice that lay before us. "The devil's not been idle in the time we were down there, boys," Ernie said. "The wind scaled the snow off clear down to the ice." "Shit," Todd said. "Sorry, Ernie," I said dumbly. "I never would have brought you out here if I'd seen this coming." "Don't feel bad, Scotty," Ernie said. "This here's an eventuality I hadn't seen coming myself." "Shit," Todd said again. As we stood for some moments looking about in mutual silence, I studied the serpentine path of clear, smooth ice that led back down to the ravine. If it had been windswept like this when Todd and I had stumbled up wet and frozen earlier. "What do you think, Scotty?" Ernie said, sparing me any further pondering along this ugly train of thought. You've been crawling around this farm since you were in three-corner pants. Where do we go from here?" Tearing my eyes from the serpentine doom that would have had us earlier, I noticed Todd was staring intently up along our intended route. "I'm at a loss, Ernie," I said, as I turned and looked back the way we'd come. "Where that idiot brother of mine tore out the culvert in the barn years ago and the old man was too cheap to fix it, the water's backed up to the old barn rubble. It's effectively two ponds now with a tangle fuck of water courses in between. There's open water there now." They kind of ground to a halt. "What about in the back of the barn rubble? Do you think he'd get across the slope at that bottom of the lawn field and up onto the hayfield?" Ernie asked, only just managing not to sound a little bit desperate. "Well, in the first place, we'll look at it, but it's just as bad as all this or worse for slope and being windswept." "Damnation," Ernie said, "if the devil ain't one persistent bugger. Do you think he could get us to the cedar bush at the back of the farm? We could go out that way to the road, couldn't we?" "Yeah, well, Ernie, I just don't know where to start. 3 or 4 possible routes, but each one's as apt to be a dead end like this." "Forget that shit," Todd announced. "You know damn well, Scott, we'd be stymied a half dozen times over trying to get back to the back of the farm. We'd be lucky if we ended up hunched over a fire in the cedar bush come dark." "I don't see we have a choice, Todd," Ernie stated. "We can't get up across that expanse of ice into the wind." "Oh, I don't know. Hear him out, Ernie," I interjected, noting Todd's trademark grin had returned. He only looked stupid. "What do you think, Scott?" Todd asked as he summated his scheme. "Sounds doable to me," I replied enthusiastically. "Hands down, beats any way I can think of as to getting us out through the back of the farm." "Are you game, Ernie?" Todd asked. "I can't believe I'm even giving consideration to such a far-fetched notion," Ernie replied, the bewilderment evident in his voice. "Good man," Todd said, mistaking Ernie's reply as affirmation as to his acceptance of the scheme. "Have at her then," Todd said as he began to pound a T-bar into the ice with his hatchet. "Like he said, Ernie, have at her," I said as I began to chip vigorously away at the ice with my T-bar. Ernie and I managed to chip a rough patch in the ice for roughly 3 feet wide and 10 or feet so long by the time it took Todd to pound his T-bar firmly into the ice. "Take a break," Todd said as he relieved Ernie of his T-bar and began to pound it into the ice, a generous 3 behind and in line with our first one. "Start at whittling me an approach to that launch pad. Oh, say a generous foot wide or so while I'm doing this, would you, Scott?" "Aye, mon Capitan," I panted and set about just that. "All right, I'm ready up here, Scott," Todd announced, testing the 2 implanted T-bars. "I'll get the ropes ready while you catch your breath." Todd continued, "You think you got enough of a runway, Scott?" "Not even close," I replied. "Remember, don't dive when you leave the launch pad. Stay upright and keep running. I'm going to give you a shove as you go past." "Gonna have to be a hell of a shove," I said, drawing deep breaths. "Oh, it will be," Todd responded. "What if you don't make it?" Ernie asked of Todd. Well, that's what I'm rigging these ropes to the stakes for, Todd answered. If he doesn't make it, we just reel him back in. Just reel him back in, you say, like he's a big old carp or something, Ernie asked skeptically. Yeah, that's right, Ernie, Todd laughed. Just like he's a big old carp. One rope to each stake with a generous leftover for Ernie and me to latch onto in case the stakes don't hold. You good with that? Todd asked as he knotted the second rope around my waist. I'll slide your T-bar across to you when you get there, Todd summated. Wait a minute here now, boys, Ernie piped up. How are you figuring as how I'm going to get across? I can't run like Scotty. Different approach for you, Ernie, Todd replied. I sit down, put my back to this T-bar. You crawl out on your belly and feet to feet on the count of 3. I send you belly bogging and across to Scott. And if I don't make it, Ernie asked, looking down the wind-swept ice towards the ravine. No problem, Todd said glibly. Scott will have the landing pad set up, T-bar pounded in, and you'll be roped to both sides, and one or the other of us will reel you in. Oh, Lordy, now I'm a carper, and he moaned, looking imploringly at me. I got you into this, Ernie, and I'll get you out. Todd's plan is solid. If worse come to worse, you might have to pull yourself up and along the rope towards me if you come up a bit short, I said, leaving no time for Ernie to dwell on any further on the matter. Todd had been calculating distances and coiling up ropes accordingly as Ernie had been pondering the implications of being a carp. Take this in your left hand, Todd said, handing me a coil of rope. Check it as you back up. Hatch it in your right hand. I'll toss your T-bar over when you get there. This one's yours, Ernie said. Todd said. This one's yours, Ernie, Todd said, handing him the other coil of rope. Todd watched intently as I backed up over the launching pad and far down the approaches I'd previously managed to whittle, paying out rope as I went. Rope good, Todd asked, watching me as I carefully coiled up the rope and setting it in my left hand, pulled the hatchet from the rope at my waist. You good? Todd asked as our eyes met. I'm good, I replied. Run like hell then, Todd yelled as he shifted his weight and checked his footing against the T-bars one last time. Struggling to gain speed on the slippery, gnarled surface we'd chipped into the ice as I ran up towards Todd, I figured my rate of travel would prove to be woefully inadequate. As I ran past Todd, his hand shot out, landing just below the middle of my shoulder blades. With a grunt of exertion, he gave me a shove. What a shove it was indeed. I was surprised at the power Todd possessed as I flew out and up over the ice. I'm sure Todd's shove served to propel me further than what my rate of travel would have contributed. Landing on my feet, I dove forward and only just belly boggined far enough up and across the ice to swing the hatchet into the frozen surface of the small knoll that was our objective. With deliberate caution, I pulled myself up towards the hatchet, barrel rolled a couple of times further up onto the knoll, bringing my hatchet with me, and planting the hatchet again, I rose to my knees. Made it, I shouted down and across the ice to where Todd and Ernie were whooping about. You know what to do, Todd called as he sent my T-bar skimming across the ice. I vigorously set about chipping what Todd referred to in his scheme as the landing pad, as Todd across the way wiggled out the hindmost T-bar he'd pounded into the ice and proceeded to set about extending the runway up to the launch pad. Ernie puffed nervously on a smoke as he had little else to do but spectate our efforts. Having chipped out the landing pad, I pounded the T-bar into the ice, dropped to my knee, and using the hatchet, whittled out a hole for my backside and 2 more for my heels. Inspecting my efforts, having chipped out the landing pad, I pounded the T-bar into the ice, dropped to my knees, and using the hatchet, whittled out a hole for my backside and 2 more for my heels. Inspecting my efforts and satisfied with the results, I called down to Ernie. Tell Todd I'm ready for you over here. Ernie gave me a solemn nod of acknowledgement as he turned and called further down to Todd, who had evidently progressed quite a ways in extending the runway while I'd been at work. And I'm gonna break this chapter into 2. Yes, I am. note here as to where I end it. So I'm going to leave this chapter as, I guess, chapter 10, part A. Sorry.